Hi, and welcome to episode 2 of the I Was For podcast. Today's episode is about defining and understanding the different types of abuse: physical, emotional, psychological, and more. We'll also dive into the signs of abuse and the long-term effects it can have on survivors. Today I have a special guest, Ashley, whom I met on TikTok while she is championing for women doing the exact same thing. Welcome, Ashley, everybody.
Hi, my name is Ashley. Hey, Ty, thank you so much for allowing me on your platform. And I am a TikTok creator where I talk about a lot of issues like sexual abuse and things like that, and share my story and just try to help other women.
Thank you for coming to join me on the podcast today, Ashley. So again, this episode's topic is going to be about understanding abuse, where we'll be defining and understanding the different types of abuse. Right now, we're dealing with physical, emotional, psychological, and more. So we're going to dive right into the signs of abuse and the long-term effects that it could have on survivors. I'm going to give an explanation, Ashley, about physical abuse, and then I have a question that I would like you to answer. Is that okay? Okay. Physical abuse is often presented with unexplained bruises, broken bones, or frequent injuries, and children may show fear around certain adults or become withdrawn. Long-term effects include chronic pain, physical disabilities, and psychological trauma, such as anxiety, PTSD, or depression. So, Ashley, what are some common signs of physical abuse that you may have witnessed or have known of in your lifetime, and how do you feel they affect a person's long-term health?
As far as physical abuse, I would say jumpiness, being afraid when you're being yelled at, because oftentimes being yelled at can lead to the feeling of thinking that somebody's going to hit you. Hiding scars, wearing certain types of makeup to conceal the physical abuse. I noticed even within myself is the fact that you just never really know when it's going to happen. So you're always kind of uptight, always kind of like walking on eggshells, wondering when the next time it's going to happen, and then wondering to yourself what you did to cause that type of abuse.
Absolutely. I went through that myself. And I'll talk about that in my new book I do have coming out, I Was For, which I'll talk about at the end of the podcast. But yes, that is absolutely correct. I did find myself doing that as well.
Mm-hmm.
The second abuse that we're going to tackle is emotional abuse. And emotional abuse is characterized by manipulation, belittling, and gaslighting, and can leave children with chronic low self-esteem and deep emotional wounds. Children experiencing emotional abuse may seem overly eager to please or usually withdrawn. Long-term impacts include depression, anxiety, and difficulty forming healthy relationships as adults. How does emotional abuse differ from other forms of abuse, and what are its long-term psychological impacts that you have witnessed?
I can only speak for myself. I know that it causes you to doubt yourself. It causes you to think that you are, until I actually had that experience, I had no clue what crazy making behavior was, or how it affected a person. And so it makes you kind of quote unquote crazy. I hate to use that word, but it does make you feel like you are crazy, like you're going crazy. You start to question your reality. One form of emotional abuse that a lot of people experience is manipulation, gaslighting, deflecting, and the long-term effects of that is always questioning yourself or second-guessing yourself, feeling like you cannot make decisions for yourself, by yourself. I know that emotional abuse can cause someone to have to overly rely on someone, like codependency, because if it happens over a long period of time, it makes you feel like you can't do anything right. It can actually cause issues with your immune system. Um, I know the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system, it can cause you to um, get to a point where you start to feel almost sick because you're constantly in a state of worry. Cortisol levels are going up, and you start to, it can just lower your immune system. The constant fear, the constant feeling like you're not doing something right. So if you experience that over a period of time, it can cause you to, um, to have a higher stress level, which higher stress levels can cause you to have a weak immune system. So emotional abuse over time can most definitely not only impact you psychologically, but also impact you physically.
Absolutely. I was just sitting here thinking while you were talking. I had a situation that happened to me, without getting into a lot of details about it, where my abuser looked at me and told me that they thought of me as their woman. And
Wow.
almost immediately, when they spoke those words, I became nauseous. Like, I literally started throwing up all over myself. Now, granted,
Wow.
earlier that day, I was sick. And one of the reasons that I was even in the same space with them is because I had just come home and they were just in the same space that I was in. And I had walked home that day with a friend of mine from school because I was sick and I didn't want to ride the school bus because of the children. You know how they could be cruel, and they were already talking about me, and that they smelled the vomit on my clothing. So one of my brother's friends had offered to walk me home that day. And when I got home and my abuser said those words to me, that was very sickening.
Mm-hmm.
I became ill. I was 15 years old, and I remember it like it was yesterday. Something about that emotional thing, like, you're sympathetic to the person because of who they are, but you also know that what they just said to you is improper.
Oftentimes when we deal with these types of abuses, physical, emotional, sexual, psychological even, what will happen is we will dissociate during the time of the abuse. And the long-term effects of dissociation is that at the time that you are dealing with the abuse, you're not always able to stay present. And so there's something called dissociation that will happen to protect the brain, even though you may not, or the mind, even though you're not able to always protect the body. And so you'll dissociate. And then when there is a time when you are later on in a safe space and something reminds you of it or something comes back up, what will often happen is the triggers and the memories will come back, and then you'll feel like you're there all over again. So dissociation is another long-term symptom or effect that emotional, physical, and sexual abuse can have on you.
Yeah, that's very true. I was just sitting here saying that I literally went all the way there, which is why I really don't, a lot of times when I'm having these conversations just abroad like this, because I could just be having them with anybody. I talk to people all day long because that's the field that I work in anyway. And so a lot of times I find myself drifting into stories where I don't need to be going that deep with it, because I need to be separate from the situation that I'm dealing with. So yeah, I absolutely get that. The next one is going to be psychological abuse. And psychological abuse, including intimidation, threats, and isolation, undermines a child's sense of safety and identity. Signs include excessive fear, confusion, or a loss of confidence. Over time, this can lead to anxiety, difficulty trusting, and a weakened sense of self. What makes a psychological abuse so damaging, and how does it manifest in the victim's behavior?
When it comes to psychological abuse, as always, I would have to go off of my experiences, and the psyche is the root. The word psyche is the root word psychological, and so that's talking about your mind. That's talking about your soul, And that is how we end up with soul wounds, psyche wounds. And it's a very, very serious type of abuse, because it's different from physical, being in the fact that it's not happening to your physical body, but it can cause you to basically zone out, being intimidated. I know one thing I can say is that when I was in church, I know we were talking about like childhood, but when I was in church, I went through a lot of psychological abuse, and just questioning. It's to me, it's the part of questioning your reality, questioning your judgment, feeling like you are being judged for something that you either spoke up about, or something that you didn't agree with, or something that you chose to do. It's a very damaging type of abuse, and it almost like leaves holes in your soul, and you lose parts of yourself dealing with that type of abuse. Um, and it's most, to me, it comes from people that are over you a lot of times, people who feel like they have control over you in some kind of way. Leadership positions, whether it's school, it could be parents. And so, yeah.
You talked about the psychological aspect in the church, and I just wanted to touch on that very briefly, because my abuser was one of my abusers was a bishop in the church.
Okay.
And I would oftentimes be sitting in church questioning or making the statement that the Bible was the most dangerous book in the world, because I felt like that book can be used to manipulate. Anybody can read from that book. You can be an atheist and read from the book. You can be a Protestant. You can be a Catholic. You can read from the book, and you can find something in that book that you're going to be able to read, that you're going to be able to manipulate to fit what you're trying to say. Anybody can.
Yeah.
And something like that is very dangerous. And that is how religion plays a part in the psychological abuse too. You know, being raised that way, and then having to compartmentalize abuse and your Christianity, like knowing that you're suffering through something, and then going to church and pretending like these same people standing in front of you preaching the word aren't at home beating the crap out of you, or you get what I'm saying, or just physically abusing or manipulating you. So that was very hard too, which is why I'm not a proponent of the church. I don't have a problem with the church within itself, because the church is just a building. I more so have a problem with the people that state they are who they are. But religion to me is the trap.
Yeah.
And that's the first. Not saying that I don't believe in God, but I believe a different way. And I'm just gonna leave it at that.
Okay.
The next one is sexual abuse, which we all can shed some light here. Sexual abuse has devastating effects on a child's ability to establish trust and boundaries, and it often leaves deep trauma related to intimacy and consent. Signs of sexual abuse may include sudden changes in behavior, fear of certain people or places, inappropriate sexual knowledge for their age, or physical signs like pain or injuries. Long-term effects include shame, guilt, and struggles with intimacy in future relationships. How does sexual abuse affect a person's boundaries and relationships in the long term?
Well, this is a major one for me, because a lot of the ways that I know that it impacts you, especially I'll speak about being a child first. A lot of times when children are sexually abused, they are groomed by someone. That is a form, in my opinion, of emotional abuse, because you're preying on someone and you're using manipulation in order to get them to feel like what you're doing to them is either okay or it should be kept a secret. And that is not okay. That's not okay at all. And some of the things that it does cause for children is an awakening of their sexuality that they are not psychologically or emotionally ready to handle. And so that is very damaging, because, children's minds are active, and when you have something that is going on like sexual abuse with a child, there's no telling how they can compartmentalize that in their mind. There is no telling how that child will either try to act that out on other children. And some of the long-term effects for that, in that case, is that child Bedwetting. I know that was the thing that I had an issue with when it was happening to me, at an age that where you shouldn't be. I think I was about 9. And then also, it can cause intimacy issues. It can cause trust issues. It can cause issues with self-esteem. And I won't speak too much about the childhood part because that is a trigger for me. But I will talk about as an adult, when you become an adult, and even if you become an adult and something happens to you, sexual abuse, it can cause you to become hypersexual, promiscuous. Also, something else just came to my mind. The panic attacks. The panic attacks, the flashbacks, the feeling like you're not worthy, feeling like you've been used up. Especially when it happened when you were a child or starting from a child, there's this thing that people don't realize, that if something like that happens to you, it causes you to, it's stuck in your energetic body. And oftentimes there has to be, for those who know about it, I won't even say the word believe, but for those who know about it, spiritual work done to rid their energetic bodies or emotional bodies of that type of abuse, because it opens you up to other predators. For some reason, it's like they can smell it on you. And I know a lot of people who hear this will identify with that, because most likely if you've been abused sexually as a child, when you get older, as you grow older, it is something that will happen to you more than once. And that's very unfortunate. So psychologically, when it comes to dealing with sexual abuse, it can cause something called complex PTSD, especially if it's happened over a period of time, for even multiple times. It can cause that type of issue. And there's a lot of work that will need to be done on the person who has experienced that, because the thoughts that come, the intrusive thoughts, the way that you feel about yourself, the way that you even see yourself, it can distort your body image. It can distort your dreams, the things that you may want to do. And it's a lot. You become susceptible to using other substances, mind altering substances, to kind of deal with that inner pain that you feel. So those are other things that I wanted to bring up.
Yeah. With the sexual abuse for myself, I don't think that I had boundaries at all with people. Kind of like the people pleasing aspect that you were saying. Even though I knew somebody, or I could feel the energy on them when they approached me, when I was younger, I didn't know how to say, these are my boundaries, respect them. Now, without a doubt. But when I was younger, for whatever reason, not having a voice, I guess feeling like my voice was stifled. Even though I didn't like somebody, I always felt like, be polite, be nice, because that's pretty much what you're taught. When people are doing you wrong or crossing your boundaries, they're always telling you how you need to be versus how people need to be. And so a lot of times when you are already in a sexual abusive situation, you already feel like you don't fit in. The least little bit of person that shows you any type of attention or time, you kind of find yourself pretty much, in a lesser term, like sucking up to that person to feel respected or to feel needed or wanted. And that is how boundaries are crossed, and people lose respect. So I think that as we get older, we understand that, when we get our voice back, or we feel like we take our authority or our autonomy back over our bodies, as grown women, not children that are being hovered over and taken advantage of, we don't allow that. We don't allow that into our energy, and we'll fight to the unalivement of ourselves to make sure that it doesn't happen to us or our children. Voices that we just didn't have when we were younger. So, yeah, it does do that part of the manipulation. Or you'll have people say, well, that's such and such, and they always been crazy. Y'all need to keep that quiet, and we just come from a generation of sweeping under the rug.
Yep, I was just getting ready to say that. That is a very common issue. And nobody ever looks at the perpetrator as if they need to be swept under the rug for their behaviors. Hide them. But you want to look at us and make it seem like our issues need to be swept under the rug. Or if we start to act out, because that's another symptom of being sexually abused. If a child starts to act out in any kind of way, they'll call it quote unquote being fast, but they never ask the child what happened to you as to why you are acting out, because a lot of times grades drop
Yeah.
You start sleeping a lot, you start dressing different, and nobody seems to notice, even though this has been happening for years, I mean, hundreds, thousands of years, these things change, and nobody ever seems to notice it when it happens, though, even though it's a common thing.
You know what I did? I found
What's that?
myself staying up at night, like almost sleeping with one eye open. Just I want to go to sleep, but I'm scared of the person in the dark. So
Wow.
that was how it changed me. Until this day, I still have insomnia. Like I probably sleep maybe 2 hours a night if I get a good 2 hours, and I've been like that since I can remember, maybe 10.
You know what's crazy? I didn't realize that could have been a contributing factor to why I have insomnia and to why I stayed up in the dark at night, like sleeping at the kitchen table with a pillow. But for me, I would have nighttime, or they call them nocturnal panic attacks. And it would be like I just couldn't breathe. My heart was beating really fast. I would feel like my throat was closing up. And it almost felt like an asthma attack. But then I would go get checked, and there was no asthma. There was no issue of asthma until I got it to a certain age. But yeah, I didn't think about that, but that's definitely a thing.
Yeah, I definitely feel like that's where mine came from. And to this day, like I said, most of my writing happens at night when everybody else is sleeping. I'm up, like, and then even on the days that I doze off early, because your body's so tired, sometimes it'll just take it from you. Even on those days, I still wake up. If I go to bed at 7, let's just say I fall asleep at 7, I'm back up by 11 o'clock.
Wow.
12 midnight the latest. Like, I don't sleep for long periods of times, and when I do fall asleep, if somebody is walking around me or moving around me, it wakes me up immediately. Like, I wake right up.
Yeah, so you're a light sleeper.
Yep,
that's what happens with abuse. Yeah.
So the next one we're going to talk about is going to be financial abuse. And in cases where financial abuse affects children, the abuser may control access to money or resources, leaving the child financially dependent. In adulthood, survivors of financial abuse may struggle with independence and financial autonomy. Signs in adults or teens include limited access to resources or being forced to hand over earnings. How does financial abuse trap victims in abusive relationships, and what are some signs that people should look for?
I know I've been through one particular relationship as an adult. So I'll start with that and then move to the child, to being a child who had that issue. Signs to look for are controlling behavior. So like if you're not able to spend a certain amount of money, if they want to keep you in a position where you're not able to work, if they want to, control the vehicle, what do you need a vehicle for? You can use it these hours or whatever. That's an issue. Controlling things, because see, the thing that people don't realize about financial abuse is that when someone wants to pay for every single thing, like the rent or the mortgage, they don't mind paying for a car or insurance or anything. To me, in my opinion, from what I went through in the relationship that I was in, this person pretty much did anything that I asked him to do. But when I wasn't willing to do something that I was comfortable with, or something that I did not want to do, which was in my right to feel that way, or to make that decision, that is when the person would exercise their financial control over me. So if it was something as far as me not wanting to sleep with him that night, or me not wanting to come home at the time that he was off work, he would try to take my car keys and things like that. So, making me feel like when he got off work, I needed to be at home. And the crazy part is it didn't start off as that type of relationship. So for it to have gotten to that place, that's why I always tell women to stay independent, because even when it looks like you are, even when it looks like someone is helping you, like a man, for example, that's not always the case. It's not always for a benevolent reason. It could be malevolent. It could be a malevolent reason why they want to, quote unquote, help you, because in them helping you and you depending on them, they can take away those things from you whenever you don't do something they want you to do, or if you mess up with something. I know when I was a child, the way that was used over my head was, I was in kinship care. until I was 18. So my grandmother had kinship of me. And when I would tell about the abuse that I was experiencing, the sexual abuse, you know, the monetary aspect of her taking care of me, or her buying me clothes, or even hygiene products, would be held over my head. You know, if you keep on telling on this person, then I'm going to stop buying this or paying for this. And I remember I was even in modeling school, which was a scam. But, you know, at the time I didn't know. But I was in modeling school. And when I told on the person who was sexually abusing me, that was something that was taken away from me. You know, I'm not going to be able to finish modeling school. And it actually hindered me when it came to being able to healthily trust someone or depend on someone. I don't see dependence as a good thing, even if it's in a small way. Mm-hmm. I don't really care for it. And that's why I try to always stay on my feet, because I recognize that when someone has more power over you financially, they have the power to control you as soon as there is something that you either don't want to do, or if there is something that you don't feel comfortable doing. You're just not able to have your own autonomy. So that's been my experience with it. And it caused me to be overly independent. That's a very big thing for Black women, because we are not able to feel safe and be ourselves. We have to kind of be in line and in step with someone else who's controlling everything. So that's why I always advocate for young women, especially, do your own thing, go to school, make your own money, because in that way you can pick and choose what you don't want to do, and you don't have to suffer the consequences or repercussions of someone else having those things to hold over your head.
I think the flip side to that, to being in a relationship and being financially abused by your partner, is them refusing to get a job as well, or them knowing, keeping you as the only person in the home that's working, so you don't even have time to save money. You don't have enough resources to save. You're taking care of children, and you can't even get out because you're the only one that's working. And then if they do get a job, it's not a job that can pay for anything, probably besides toiletries, if they would even insist on buying that. But if they have substance abuse issues, then they're not going to focus on that. They're going to focus on the issues that they have. And so that's another way that I know you can be financially abused as well, being the only person as a female in a relationship that works. I think that's a really big part.
Wow. Now that touches on weaponized incompetence.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So the next one we're going to talk about is going to be verbal abuse. Verbal abuse, including insults, name-calling, or constant criticism, erodes a child's self-esteem. Children may become overly self-critical or extremely quiet, avoiding situations where they might be criticized. Over time, verbal abuse leads to deep self-doubt, depression, and a skewed sense of self-worth. How does verbal abuse manifest, and what are its long-term effects?
I experienced a lot of that growing up from different relatives. And one thing that I can't stand is for somebody to tell me what to do and for someone to yell at me. Those are things that I have big issues with. I know for me, like the name calling, the threats of what you're going to do, you know, if I don't comply, or if I do something wrong, that's a big issue. And so for me, the long-term effects of that type of abuse, verbal abuse, is, again, me wanting to do my own thing and stay by myself, because I just don't like being told what to do. I don't like being yelled at. I don't like feeling small. I don't like to be bothered in those kinds of ways, because I lived in an environment where I was always, not always, but for a lot of my childhood, talked down upon, made to feel like I was almost less than when the person's temper would get out of hand. And that's just something that I can't stand. And to add to that, another thing that happens, how it's harmful and the long-term effects, is when you have children, as much as you hated what happened to you, you find yourself lashing out in those kinds of ways. I ended up having anger issues. I still do. I have a very bad temper. And when I became a parent and my children got of age where I know they knew what was right from wrong, I had to start checking myself when it came to me just wanting to be a loose cannon at the mouth. Thankfully, I caught myself with that, but I did notice that it was there, and having to hold that type of anger in made me go to my therapist and say, hey, this is becoming an issue. This is how I was raised, and I know that it's not right, and I love my children so much. I don't want to inflict that same type of harm on them. And so I had to go through like anger management. I had to read books on rage. I had to stop myself and realize, like, when you feel that initial feeling of wanting to just snap out or go on a rage, because I can feel that anger in my stomach. Still to this day, if I get upset or if I talk about it too much, I can still feel that rage. And I have to ask myself in that moment, or kind of like become aware, like, this is where that's coming from. You're triggered, and the way that they acted out their anger onto you is the way that you want to kind of act out your anger, because that's how you were taught. So this is not you. You have to take a step back. And that is what also caused me to discipline my children in a different way. Some people think that it's soft or gentle parenting, because that is what it is. But they've come up with these terms because the people that are my age, the millennials, we have had that type of situation. Even some of the generation before me, they've had those experiences as well. But I don't think they necessarily had the tools. And so that's something that I stay away from, and I recognize within myself, and I try to work on it and deal with it appropriately.
And I'm the total opposite. So I did not grow up in a home where my parents yelled at each other at all. I never heard my mom or my father raise their voice at each other, never heard them curse. They never drank. I did not grow up in a household where people were violent. However, when I started to deal in a particular relationship that I was in, my marriage, I was married to a very aggressive individual. Mm-hmm. And he would often say things like, you're just very hard, like you're not soft. And I was like, it depends on the person that I'm with. When you are an aggressive person, based on the things that I've already been through in my life, that causes me to kind of tense up. Mm-hmm. So I'm automatically gonna tense up, and I'm gonna behave in a way that I feel like I'm dealing with a man. Like I have to be a man. You get what I'm saying? Like it makes me turn on. It makes me turn on that protection side of me, because at this point in my life, I need to protect myself. No one is going to, affect me in that way. And so I was trying to get him to understand, and a lot of men need to understand that you can't handle a woman hard like that and expect her to be soft.
Exactly.
That's just not how that works. And a lot of people feel like you could talk to people any kind of way and you're going to get the same result. But then when you speak to them, you have to, watch your tone. Make sure, make sure you're not saying this way, or you're being polite. But they can say whatever they want to say any kind of way. But you have to watch your tone. And so growing up, I did not grow up in that type of environment. But getting into that relationship, that was a lot of verbal abuse, especially when you're not used to someone yelling at you and screaming at you. Now, I am a person that naturally talks loud, and I'm a very passionate person. So it's easier for me to escalate there if I'm already being passionate about something that I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. But I'm a very patient person, so it takes a lot for me to get upset with you.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not the type of person that just gets mad. I get irritated very easily, especially when I think you should know better. Or if I think this is a stupid conversation, and I'm sorry, because I like to respect everybody's point of view, but you know how when you're listening, like some of these things that we listen to when we're on TikTok, it's stupid conversation when you hear it. Yeah. So when I'm saying that, I'm not saying it in a sense of I don't respect what somebody is saying, so I think it's stupid. But you trying to convince me that the sky is red when I'm clearly looking at a blue sky is a stupid and pointless conversation, because I can see. And I see, you understand what I'm saying, what it is. So I mean it from that aspect of that. But I did not grow up like that. And so to get into a relationship where the person was overly aggressive, I think that had a lot of impact on our relationship, like how we communicate, he and I both, with each other. Because it was almost like we were always at war. We were always yelling at each other, and nobody was hearing the other person, because you got this person being aggressive. I'm not an aggressive person. I'm an assertive person, and there is a difference. You're not going to walk over me, but I'm not aggressive. Like, I'm not walking up on you. I'm not doing all of that.
Right.
And to me, that's very confrontational when you have someone that does that. So now that I'm not in that relationship and I've gone through years of therapy, I can see how that was a very verbally abusive relationship. And I didn't really see that until I was outside of that relationship. I knew that it wasn't my normal, because I didn't grow up like that. And my other relationships weren't like that. But I couldn't see it while I was in it, if that makes sense. Once I got out of it, I was like, yeah, that was, I don't even know how we were together.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Okay, so our last and final topic of abuse that we're going to talk about is going to be child abuse and grooming. And this seems to be a hot topic lately. I'm seeing it a lot over TikTok. I'm just seeing it in general as we're talking about the femicide of women and then just child abuse as a whole. Child abuse can involve any combination of physical, emotional, or psychological harm, often occurring in environments where children feel safe. Grooming is a common method abusers use to gain a child's trust before abuse begins, making it harder for the child to recognize the abuse. Signs of grooming include an adult showing an unusual interest in the child, spending time alone with them, giving them gifts or privileges not given to others. Long-term consequences of child abuse include difficulty forming healthy relationships, chronic anxiety, and higher vulnerability to future abuse. Understanding the signs and impacts of these types of abuse is critical in helping protect and support children who are at risk, and recognizing the patterns of grooming is equally important in preventing abuse before it escalates. How does grooming work as a tactic used by abusers, and why is it so difficult for children to recognize and report this type of abuse?
To answer the last part of that is, children don't, unless they're being taught, ahead of time that these are the things to look for, children just won't know. But one thing that came to my mind is the person will automatically make the child feel special, feel different, or feel set apart from the other children. Like in my case, I have a lot of cousins that are like a few years younger than me. I have an older sister. I have other cousins. And out of all of us, even though I was not the only one, at that time that this was happening to me, I was always, it was a lot of time with this person alone, like going to the store. I remember he took me to the breadsmith store. I forgot what the name of the bread company was, but he would take me there alone. Just like give you special privileges, make you feel like out of all the people in the room, he's always paying attention to, or he's always having you in mind. That's an issue that I experienced, that I see or saw. Grooming tactics by abusers can be giving you money. I had a sweet tooth when I was younger, and my uncle used to have a candy store. And a lot of my cousins or other family members, he would make them like pay for the candy, but I could get it for free. And that's one thing that I think turned me off from eating candy in my later, like right now in my life. When I had that flashback, I began to despise chocolate and candy, because what I didn't realize is, as I was coming to terms with what happened to me and going through legal processes and things, I was eating a lot of candy when I would feel sad about my family ostracizing me. Just an overabundance of candy, overabundance of sweets and sodas and stuff like that. And that's what he kind of used to always get me. And I had like I don't know, I just loved candy. And that's one thing that he kind of held over my head, the making you feel special and things like that. So yeah, that's what it was for me. And I think another reason why it's difficult for children to talk about it or to report it is because most of the time this groomer/abuser will be someone that everybody looks up to. Mm-hmm. It'll be someone that everybody kind of holds in high esteem. Mm-hmm. Like me, for example, my great uncle, he was very well known in the community, very well known in the schools, in the neighborhood. He would do charity work in the neighborhood, like setting up drives and picnics and barbecues and stuff like that. And so one thing that you look at as a child, I know I did, was how is everybody going to see me if I tell on this person, because everybody loves this person. You know, they're going to look at me and think something's wrong with me. And that's exactly what happened. So also, when children hear and see other things and how people react to things, that can make them fearful as well. So it's a lot of different reasons, but those are just some reasons for me.
Yeah, I was just sitting here reminiscing, and not in a good way, of what you were saying. But one of the reasons why I think I like sodas to this day, because when we were little, our parents didn't allow us to drink sodas because it was like 8 of us, right? So I have 7 siblings, and we didn't have stuff like sodas and candy and chips and things like that. But my abuser would take me off with him and would take me to the grocery store and just buy me my own case of soda.
Wow.
So that's how I was even introduced to soda in the first place. Mm-hmm. Because we never had it. And then, you know, as the years went on growing up, and you go to family functions and things like that, barbecues, family reunions, you know, of course you would get sodas and things like that. But we were poor, essentially, so we couldn't even afford soda. Even though it was as cheap as it was, we still couldn't afford it because there were so many of us. So that's the one thing that I can remember that happened to me when it came to the grooming aspect. Or I can remember one time him asking, "Are you going to tell on me? Tell me, are you going to tell?" You know what I'm saying? And I would be like, "Yeah, I'm going to tell. Yeah." You know, I didn't say I wasn't going to tell. I was like, yeah, I'm going to tell. And it still didn't make a difference, because at that point, when no one is believing you, they just have free reign at that point.
Right. That's the dangerous part. That's the very dangerous part. And that's what happened with my uncle. Once it happened and I started to tell, that's when it was free reign. Now you're touching me in front of everybody. Now you're talking to me in front of everybody. And instead of them looking at me and saying, "Okay, we need to protect you," they thought they had to protect him from me. I'm not bothering that man. That man is bothering me. So the grooming comes with a group of people that will protect the groomer/abuser and ostracize the child or the person that it's happening to. And that's exactly what happened.
Anything to keep our secrets.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, Ashley, this wraps up today's episode of I Was 4, and I hope this conversation has shed light on the different forms of abuse and how they affect survivors, especially when they begin at such a young age. And remember, recognizing these signs can make a world of difference in someone's life. Before we go, I would like to thank you, Ashley, for joining us today, and can you please let everyone know where they can find you?
Thank you so much. I would just first like to say thank you so much, Ty, for having me on your platform. Thank you so much for the things that you do to give back to others, even though you don't have to, but you're turning your pain into something that can help others. And I really do appreciate that for the people who may not be at that place. You can find me on TikTok. I'm under My Divinity Is Within 8909. You can also email me at awilson8909.aw@gmail.com. I'm also on Instagram under My Divinity Is Within 8909. So that's TikTok and Instagram. My Divinity Is Within 8909. And my email address is awilson8909.aw@gmail.com. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome, Ashley. And again, thank you for joining me today. This is where you can find Ashley. Again, that's going to be TikTok or Instagram at My Divinity Is Within 8909, or her email address is awilson8909.aw@gmail.com. Again, I am the Redhead 47, and although I am a professional in this field, I am not acting as one when I am hosting my podcast. This is for education purposes only, and I hope to reach and that everyone will receive the message. Again, thank you for joining us tonight. This is I Was For, and I am the Redhead 47.